Okay, I am live once again. I think I'm figuring it out. Hey, look, this is the chat. Okay, so we're back over here doing this again. Um, I just had previously started a live talking about the sixth season of Consciousness Live, my podcast, and I had made some mistakes. So I'm trying to figure this out. So if you don't know, if you're gonna watch this later or whatever, if you're joining me now, I had some problems with my last live discussion, and these things are live. If you haven't watched that one that I did with Rachel Dennison, by the way, you should watch it because it comes on. We were talking for a half hour before I realized that I hadn't hit go live. I just it's no one cares, but I hit start streaming, which connects OBS to the YouTube, and then there's a separate button that you have to connect that says go live that starts it actually broadcasting. So me and my infinite genius hood didn't realize that, and I saw that it was streaming. I thought the connection was there, and I was like, we're live, and then we started talking, and then I gradually was figuring out as I was talking with her that we were not maybe live. And I was very confused. So I was listening to what she was saying and also thinking to myself, should I interrupt her and tell her that we're not live actually? But then I was listening to what she was saying and she was answering my question. It was interesting. But yeah, so I waited for her to finish and then I told her, oh yeah, we're not live. But it was very embarrassing and ridiculous. So now I'm trying to make sure that everything is nailed down. And I also want to incorporate the possibility of taking comments from the viewers, such that there are. Now I record these whenever anyone is available, so it's hard to actually get a set schedule, and who knows when anyone is around or whatever. And I don't really announce these or advertise them, and especially since I'm off Twitter, there's no real place. I mean, I'm on Blue Sky, if I announce them over there, but anyway, I'm easily distracted. Is that a shiny thing? No. What I'm trying to say is, yeah, after that really embarrassing live fiasco, I wanted to make sure that it didn't happen again. So on the previous version of this live stream, I started it accidentally marking it as for kids, so the chat was disabled. So I'm trying to make sure that I know all the right settings and how to do it from OBS instead of doing it from YouTube. Probably nobody cares about this, but if anybody is listening and happens to be around, they could type something in the chat and let me know that I know how to do that because I've never done it before. In the meantime, just to reiterate some things that I was saying, I'm excited. I have several guests lined up, and I've already mentioned them, but I'll in the previous accidental video, but I'll say them again. Here is Michael Graziano, Eric Switchkable, um, Steve Fleming, Matthias Michel, and Ned Block. So those are the persons that I have lined up for this sixth season of Consciousness Live. I actually can't believe that I've been doing this podcast for 6 years, and that before that I was doing Spacetime Mind for I don't know, a year and a half or something like that. So I've been doing these conversations for quite some time. That's what I enjoy the most is having those kinds of conversations. It's really useful for me. I should probably do more to make sure that the guests like explain the topics. I don't really do any of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of when I listen to other podcasts, they always make sure that people explain stuff, and I always find that kind of boring. But of course, I'm one person, and so many other people they wouldn't. They might find that interesting. So who knows? But I always just try to go right for the conversation, and not much else. But I guess that, different persons will enjoy different things. Okay. So, anyway, if there's any questions or you have any comments, I would be happy to have them because I am trying to figure out whether I can do this chat in real time. So, on the other notes, I have asked a lot of people, sent out a lot of emails And usually what happens is, you get a spattering of people that reply, and then later trickles, people say, yeah, I'll do it, but I'm not busy until August or something like. So it's still possible that I'll be able to arrange some further conversations than the ones that I have already. But it's actually a lot of work, and we're having to read 3 books just for this. So that's, yeah, fun and exciting, but also a lot of work. And not that I'm against it, but okay. So let's see here. What else is going on around here? I'm kind of stalling to see if anyone's going to use the chat feature to make sure. I don't know if it's just because I don't know how to do it or if no one's doing it. But I've seen people chat here before, or I mean, type in messages. Um, have I actually? I think I have. Yeah, I think the last time actually that's how I knew we were live finally. Was that there were people chatting. Ah, look, there's someone that just said something to me. Uh, Shentifier? What do you think of phenomenal transparency being an analytic a priori truth, as in qualia by definition, just refer to what its likeness? Um, there's a lot going on in that sentence there. Uh, what do I think of phenomenal transparency being analytic a priori? I mean, generally, I'm sort of suspicious of analytic a priori truths, unless they're supposed to. Analytic means true by definition or something. It depends on what you mean by analytic. Lots of people mean different things by it. Um, but if you just mean sort of like once you understand the meaning of the words, then you sort of think that it's true, like all bachelors are unmarried or something. Then if that's what you mean, uh, phenomenal transparency. I'm familiar with transparency claims, but I guess I haven't heard the term phenomenal transparency, to be honest with you. But then you say qualia by definition just refer to what its likeness. Uh, I mean, that's how I use the term. I don't really use the term qualia. I think qualia is kind of an old-fashioned word, actually. No offense. But I feel like it's like got a lot of baggage. And as long as you sort of mean something innocuous by it, I'm not against it. But yeah, I do think that if qualia means anything, then it means what its likeness, the what it's like aspect. I guess the reason why people might, maybe why you're asking, I don't know, you feel free to follow up. I've seen other people invite people on so they could talk them face to face. I don't know how to do that either, though. But at least now I know I can see chats. So that's good. But I guess the people who might be a little unhappy with that claim would be people who think that you could have unconscious qualities, mental qualities that occur unconsciously, like the painfulness of pain, but not being conscious painfulness of pain, or the redness of red, but not being conscious redness of red. So even there, sometimes people will say, yeah, they're fine with that, but what they mean is something like the what is likeness, which is unconscious. But so there's terminological disputes there all over the place. But I am a phenomenal realist in whatever sense that you like that. So I think that there is something that's like what it's like, those properties, properties of creatures. You could say they're properties of states. You could say they're properties of individuals. It's equivalent to my way of thinking. Um, does that answer your question? I don't know. I'm kind of just rambling because I'm not 100% sure what you're asking. Um, but since I'm rambling, one of the reasons why I like the Shambi argument, which is an argument that you know that that starts from the conceivability of a creature physically just like myself, which is conscious and merely physical. Sometimes people, if you read, I thought of this one day when I was really angry arguing with someone, and they were talking about zombies and telling me that physicalism was false as a result, and I was just so frustrated. I was like, well, no, dualism is false because I can imagine physical consciousness. It's like silly to say that. But then, so born out of frustration, these creatures that I called Shambis, it turns out that they've been hanging around for a while under different names, and people have thought of this a few times in the literature before I had, so nothing is new under the sun. In fact, when I wrote about this on my blog way back when, someone immediately came over and said, "Oh, someone already thought of this." It turns out it was Keith Frankish. So, and a couple other people too. Scott Sturgeon has a paper on this from before, and Cody Baylock, and others. So the idea that consciousness could be physical is, nothing new to physicalists. People who like physicalism think that consciousness could be physical. So I see that you just said something, but I'll finish my rambling and then see what you said. So clearly it seemed to me that it's conceivable that consciousness is physical. That argument, which starts from the conceivability of consciousness being physical, seems to me to work against illusionism and dualism at the same time. And the reasons for that are interesting, but let me see what Shantafire says. So the reason I ask is because I'm probing if the identity theory can be defended, which would seem to have to deny transparency as there's a hidden physical essence. Interesting. Yeah. So I am friendly to the identity theory myself. So yeah, if you think that the redness of red is a brain state, and we can introspect the redness of red, but not the brain state aspect of it, then it seems like the thing which is phenomenal, namely the brain state, had some non what it's like property or something like that. Is that the way the objection is supposed to go? Because the way I would tend to hear it is to say something more like, well, that physical state does have a what is likeness property. So there's nothing hidden there. What's hidden is the basis of it, the metaphysical nature of it, so to speak. But what's not hidden is the what is likeness, and that is the physical. So there's the qualia part, the what is likeness doesn't exhaust its nature because it's a physical state. But so I guess you do have to deny something like revelation, right? You would have to deny the revelation thesis. If you're interested in that, I had a discussion with Philip Goff about that way back a long time ago, the very first discussion I had with him. And we talked a lot about that. My own particular view is to think that there's like an aspect of it, of the state, which is a what it's like aspect, and then there's the physical aspect. And we only have introspective access to one of those aspects. Some people don't like that way of talking, but it's interesting though. I see why you're asking now. Yeah, I like that. Are you defending the identity theory, or just I mean, you say you still want to see if it can be defended, but what I meant to ask is like, are you interested in it, or are you trying to attack it? Oh, someone wants to ask questions but is commuting, so I'll turn in later. Okay. Yeah, I was mostly just testing this to see if it worked, but I can hang around for a little while, I guess, if people are hanging around. The kids are at a play date, so a little bit of time. I'm friendly to identity theory, but struggle to believe it. Suppose you have a house with a front and a back aspect. Those aspects in themselves are distinct. Yeah, I'm asking because of God. You struggle to believe the identity theory. Huh. Yeah. I mean, but before I get to the other point that you're making, I wonder if people who struggle to believe the identity theory struggle to believe the other theories. Not, I'm not saying you aren't. I don't know you, although, yeah. So panpsychism seems just as struggleable. Is that a word? That electrons are conscious seems pretty bizarre. So identity theory is as bizarre as that. That it could be a brain state. It depends on certain views. I mean, if you have a certain view of perception that you mix with that, then yeah, it can seem pretty bizarre. But I don't know if it's I don't know if I struggle to believe the identity theory. It just seems like yeah, be sort of interesting if that's what it was. But then again, could be something else. So suppose you have a house with a front and back aspect. Those aspects in themselves are distinct. Um, they're distinct in the sense that they have to be viewed from a particular place. Um, oh no, a qualia quietist, and an upside down smiley face. I don't know what these emojis mean. I come from a pre-emoji time, guys. We didn't do emojis, so I don't know what upside down emoji means. But I think it means like I said something ridiculous. I have no idea. Okay, I'm literally not joking, But I come from the day where we thought it was cool to spell hell on a calculator. 7734 upside down. Oh yeah, naughty, naughty. Okay. Anyway, you should never let me in front of a camera because I start going off the rails very quickly. Um, but so I think that the house is a house, and then there are certain things you have to be in a place to view. So the house viewed from the inside is distinct from the house viewed from the outside. There's not two things. There's just a house, which has an interior and an exterior. So you just can't see the exterior. Excuse me, you can't see the interior from the exterior. You have to go inside. You have to be inside. So with consciousness, I think if it's a brain state, then that it would be like that. You've got to be inside. You've got to be in the brain state. Uh, you got to instantiate the state. I mean, not inside the state, obviously, but you got to be in the state in order to be able to have access to that property, which is there even when viewed from the outside, but you just don't have access to it. I mean, that's the way that I would uh, think about that. Um, but yeah, I wish people would pay more attention to the identity theory. My position has always been, and that's kind of what I was hinting at a second ago. My position has always been that the identity theory is just as absurd as any of these other theories. So it's just as bizarre as you pick your favorite theory. I mean, I think functionalism is bizarre because of things like, organizing a nation state into a mind and organizing popsicle sticks in the right way could result in a mind. I think that's very strange, but I struggle to find that as something that I could take seriously with respect to consciousness. But that could just be the last prejudice of my pre-philosophical sense that's really ingrained in me. My gut reaction that there's got to be something biological to account for consciousness. But anyway, so I don't want to get derailed. My point was simply to say that I think it's equally strange. It's as strange as any of these other views. Uh, um, yeah, so dual aspect monism, as far as I understand it, which, I don't really I don't know. So I tried to find someone to talk to about this. Um, and I found someone who kind of endorsed a neutral monism, which is as close as I could find. Uh, and I have that conversation. By the way, the consciousness life stuff that I do, a lot of it, I try to find people who have views that I don't really understand. And I want to talk to them to find out why they hold those views, not to attack them or anything. But sometimes I get carried away and do start attacking, but that's not my intention. But the dual aspect monism is that there's one kind of stuff that's neither physical nor mental, but has these two aspects, which somehow presents to us or something, to whatever it is, and to something, these two aspects, the physical, that we call the physical, and the mental. So I think that the differences between that view, um, the differences between that view and the identity theory, well, they're at the metaphysical level. So the identity theory says that, the stuff that's physical is not mental in any way. And then you build up some stuff and then you get a combination of physical stuff that is consciousness. The analogy is with water and gold. You build up some physical stuff and then you get gold or water. So that's very different at the metaphysical fundamental level than it is for the dual aspect monist, who thinks that the fundamental stuff is neither physical nor mental, and that in some sense physical stuff isn't fundamental. So that's the difference. The difference is there, not at the epistemic level, but at the metaphysical level. But I see why you're asking that. But by the way, Mike, or is it Krite Mike? I don't know what to call people who I only know by their handles. But you're saying what theory do I endorse and is not bizarre? I don't really endorse any theory. I think that all of this stuff, sometimes people get mad at me when I say this, but I truly believe that this stuff is difficult and that nobody knows. I endorse what the fuckism, like nobody knows. Could be anything. So instead of like thinking a theory is true, I think that what you should do is kind of distribute your belief amongst the options in a way that reflects how much you would be willing to bet on them, in sort of, in a Bayesian way, if you want to simplify it. But I think that some views are more probable than others, and some that I would be more likely to defend, and others I'd be more surprised to find out that they were true. But I don't really. That's why I start arguing with most people, because if I find someone that wants to attack physicalism, I'll defend physicalism. If I find someone attacking dualism, I'll defend dualism. There are some dualist views that I take more seriously than others. And if reality happened to be a way that was dualistic or non-dualistic, I would be like, okay, that's interesting. So my own personal view is that I don't know, but I think that what my strongest commitment, the one that I think that my bedrock, like default, that I fall back on a lot, is some kind of identity theory between the mind and the brain, and a global physicalism. So that's kind of where my my intuitive assessment, that's where my intuitions lie, I would say. uh, it, like, just naturally, I sort of feel like, yeah, physicalism and identity theory. When I was younger, I was kind of like a naive dualist, and I just thought, yeah, when I read Descartes, I was like, duh, this is clearly, you I thought the conceivability argument was shut and just done. But because of mental causation mostly, um, well, the pineal gland interactionism that's poor Descartes, but interactionism in and of itself is not as silly an idea, I think, and it certainly isn't ruled out by anything that we know. There's some reasons to think that you should be suspicious of it. It's not my preferred view, but I don't think that it's isn't like logically incoherent or refuted by anything that we know for sure. The kind of interactionism that I would be most like, dualistic interactionism, like the mind, non-physical mind interacting with the physical world, I would think in the quantum realm probably is the best place to find some kind of interaction like that. It doesn't really violate the laws of physics as we know it. Now, what you can get out of that is a different question, and people have explored that. I like the Chalmers and Calvin McLean, is it? I'm blanking on his name for whatever reason, but I'm interested in that kind of stuff. But my default view, my like the thing that I think, like if I were king of the world, I would make it so that physicalism were true. Because it just seems like that seems to me to be sort of the way things work. Okay, so now is it bizarre? Well, I was going to point this out. I'm going to be talking with Eric Schwitzgable in 2 weeks, who has a new book coming out called The Weirdness of the World. And in it, he tries to argue for what he calls universal bizarreness and universal dubity. I don't know how to say it. Dubiety, dubity, what dubiousness. So the idea is supposed to be that every answer to the mind body problem is theoretically strange, what he calls a theoretical wilderness, a bizarre. Every according to him, every mind body solution has a bizarre outcome. For example, mind brain identity has the outcome that, there could be physical beings that behaved very much just like us but weren't conscious in any way, simply because they had a different constitution, that their what was in their head, their quote unquote brain, was made from computer chips. If mind brain identity is true, then those kind of creatures can't be conscious. Now, my own view is that that's just an intuition. We've never met anything like that, although we have ChatGPT and things like that that put pressure on that. Not the consciousness part, but just I think they put pressure on this idea that we can incrementally be getting closer to something that has that kind of behavior, which then would really blow our circuits, our intuitive circuits. So, yeah, is there any non-bizarre theory of this stuff? I don't know. I'm going to try to convince Eric that physicalism isn't as bizarre as he thinks it is, for sort of the reasons I've been already hinting at. That I just don't think that the consequences are all that serious. So, yeah. So what do you say? Precisely like you, I do not really fully endorse the particular good. Hence, I'm a more agnostic position, which is exactly what quality is most about. Well, I would disagree with that. I don't know. Maybe you're using that term in a slightly different way. But if you mean the kind of quality of quietism that comes from people like Pete Mandic, um, I think he means more than that. I think he means to indicate the idea that the very concept of qualia is kind of bankrupt. It doesn't mean anything, and people use it as a way to pretend like they're saying something meaningful, like qualia is physical or qualia are not physical, when it can't be used to say anything meaningful because it's like a nonsense gibberish word that doesn't have a referent, and so therefore we shouldn't speak about it. We shouldn't theorize about this stuff because we don't have any way to talk about it. I think that's more that's stronger than maybe what you meant by quietism. Maybe what you mean is that, well, it's just so difficult to choose between an option in this area that we shouldn't waste our time trying to argue about it because it's just, you could pick any one of these things. So yeah, I don't know if I'd be that pessimistic. Um, Yeah, anyway, so before I forget what I was going to say, though, I was trying to say that the thing that I'm most committed to is like physicalism, and the super most committed I am is to the claim that physicalism hasn't been refuted. So that's the thing that I usually end up arguing with people about, is that people think that like the conceivability arguments just refute physicalism, or there's something laughably absurd about physicalism. People like Bernardo who say it's just baloney or it's nonsense or it's completely like we should be over it by now. There's books called The Waning of Physicalism. It's like those kinds of things kind of annoy me. So when someone comes around saying the a priori arguments against physicalism just refute it and we should move on with our lives, then I go, no, they don't. So I don't think physicalism has been refuted in any meaningful sense. What I think is that there are some reasons that some people have for looking elsewhere, which is fine. Yeah, the beetle in the box thing. See, I disagree with that way of thinking about. I also don't use the word qualia because maybe you could, that the way it's been traditionally defined as being ineffable, something you can't express in words, and something that's private that only you can know about, and things like that. Those are things. Um, uh, that I don't think are required in order to believe in phenomenal consciousness. So that's why I think talking about phenomenal consciousness is more interesting. And also, as Shantafire was just saying, yeah. So what's going to be bizarre is going to be culturally relative. Exactly. So exactly. So someone in a language that I cannot pronounce, sorry, is saying, "Good evening. What do you think about solipsism? Is it possible to be consistent solipsism, believe in free will?" Oh, interesting. I tried to find a solipsist to talk to for my podcast, Consciousness Live. I did find one, I think, and I do have that discussion up there. Solipsism, it depends on what you mean by it. So uh, there's different meanings to that term, some of which are, I think, kind of almost true. In other words, that couldn't possibly, well, not possibly, but would be very strange if they were true. So on one meaning of the term, I think what most people think by it is simply that there's only one mind. Probably you're thinking it's yours, but obviously it would be mine. So solipsists are sometimes cast as this view that there's only one mind. On the other hand, you might think, well, no, solipsism is the view that we only have evidence for one mind, whether or not there are multiple minds or not. It's that we learn to use mental language by our own case. So that's a more limited claim. Simply, I don't know if you have pain, because what I mean by pain is only anchored in my own case. So how could I know? It doesn't make any sense to talk about pain for you, because pain simply means the state that I go into in certain instances. So I don't know. If you think the first one, that is just that there's just one mind, I think, yeah, that the logical problem with solipsism, no one's ever solved that. I don't think anyone's ever really refuted solipsism or given a knockdown argument that that solipsism is false. I'm going to be talking with someone in 2 weeks. This guy Eric I've mentioned already. He has an argument he tries to make against solipsism, starting from the fact that he's lost at chess. So he says, "Well, gee, I've lost at chess before, and if I was the only mind, then why would I want to beat myself? I would let myself win or something like that." So if solipsism were true, you would predict different things. I don't know if that argument works, so we'll see how seriously he takes it. But I think there's all sorts of practical reasons not to take solipsism too seriously. And I also think that I don't really believe that you have to reach absolute certainty to know something. So I can't know with certainty that I am the only mind or not. But I don't think that means I don't know it. So I see someone saying translucency, which is something I'm more interested in. I mean, that I would more endorse, but hold on, I'm trying to say something about solipsism. So about free will. Free will is one of those things. I probably started out as a really radical libertarian in free will, and have kind of gradually been beaten down over the years into thinking, okay, compatibilism or something like it is probably true, although I don't like to have to admit that. But if you think that compatibilism is true, then solipsism and compatibilism go hand in hand. It's fine. On the other hand, I don't know why it would. I don't know why it would wouldn't work with libertarian free will either if you thought that was a thing. So I think that questions about free will are kind of orthogonal to questions about solipsism. But I don't know. Maybe you had something in mind that would put them at odds with each other or something like that. My own view is to think that solipsism is false, even though I can't prove that it's false. But let's see. Okay. A limit of, yeah. So that's the one. Someone saying, Mike is saying they would endorse a limit of materialism. I guess out of all the views, when I said I was kind of hedge my bets, I guess the one view I wouldn't hedge my bets on is the limit of materialism. I mean, I was talking with Dave Chalmers about this one time, and he said that he thinks that there's a small chance that illusionism could be true or limited materialism could be true. And I was kind of blown away by that because, yeah, I don't really see how it could be true, to be honest with you. I don't really see how there could be someone in the same situation as me right now, physically just like me, who thought they were conscious and weren't, or who had this other kind of consciousness that these guys were talking about. I really just don't, I can't make sense of it. What I can do is make sense of a closely related claim, which is that our pre-theoretical notion of consciousness is radically different than consciousness actually is. That would be okay. That's what I've called weak illusionism, and other people call that too. I think Dave coined that term. But anyway, I think weak illusionism is almost everyone has to accept it. I don't know of any views out there that wouldn't accept that some aspect of consciousness doesn't present the world as it really is. There's some part of our epistemic relation to it isn't off in a way. So, but to really think that I'm not conscious right now, to really take that seriously, I don't really know how to do it. I don't. To believe that I have phenomenal consciousness, but not to really have it. I sort of know how to say the words and conceptually think of a creature who's in a situation like that, but I can't think of it happening to me. I just don't, like right now. And this is what the people who endorse that kind of illusionism, that's what they say, is that if you think that, zombies are conceivable, and I think they're epistemically conceivable, if you think that, that, then you don't know you aren't one right now. I just don't understand. I can't understand that. So out of all the positions that there are, I would assign the very least possibility to illusionism, and almost zero. It's close to zero. Let's say arbitrarily close to zero for illusionism and eliminativism. When it comes to the propositional attitudes like beliefs and stuff, even there, I was just like, I'm kind of with Jerry Fodor on this. He said, if folk psychology were wrong, it would just be the greatest disaster in the history of mankind, or science of the mind. What would that even mean for there not to be beliefs? I mean, I don't even know. I know a closely related claim that in the brain there are not going to be things like sentence-like structures that we would. So that's different, but that's not to say that at the psychological level. Excuse me. Should have brought some water. That's not to say that at the psychological level there wouldn't be such things as beliefs or these other folk psychological attitudes. So let's see now. Phenomenal translucency being inconsistency with identity theory, not just transparency, as in Mary would still learn new information in addition to the structural dynamic info. So I believe Mary would learn something new. 100% agree that she would learn something new when she sees red. She would learn what it's like for her to see red and what it's like to see red, because she didn't know that before. She would know about the brain state, but to use the house analogy, it's a bit like knowing about the exterior of the house without going inside. So you may be able to say some things about it. I, in fact, think she would be able to say some things about it, like that it's structurally, relationally similar to pink and less similar to green and so forth. She might be able to map out the human color quality space because she would have access to all that third-person information from other persons. She would know all the science, as it were. So she would know that red is more similar to pink than it is green, and all those kinds of things. I even think that after she sees red for the first time, she'll be able to deduce that red is a brain state, or vice versa, that brain state is red. And so these mix match ones where she sees a color but doesn't know which one it is. The reason I think that is because, like, think about the water and H2O case. Like, imagine someone who didn't have the concept of water. Well, they're not going to get the concept of water by looking at physics. They need the concept. Once they acquire the concept, then they're in a position to deduce that water is H2O, if you think that can be done, which I, on certain days, do think can be done. On other days, I get skeptical, so I do go back and forth. But I do think that's not ridiculous to believe that you could deduce that water is H2O if you were an ideal agent who had all the relevant information. Some constrained set of base information, however, how small of a constrained set we could debate about. But I think, okay. I'm kind of convinced by the Cosmoscope arguments with this idea that you could build something which would do this. Anyway, so what's going to happen when Mary looks at the tomato or whatever is she's going to acquire a new concept. She's going to first of all have the experience. She's going to see red. Then she's going to get the concept. Oh, that's what it's like to see red. The concept, the phenomenal concept, the direct phenomenal concept, the one that you can only have when you're seeing red, or otherwise have red in your mind. I'm aphantasic, I think, so I can't visualize things. Like when someone says, imagine a tomato, I don't know what I do, but I don't see a tomato. I'm usually looking at something red when I'm talking about this stuff. But if you're picturing in your mind, that's great for you. With sounds, I'm a bit better, so I can picture sounds mentally, but not visual stuff. Okay, good. So you acquire a concept, the one that you can have only when you're having the kind of experience that's relevant. So you're looking at the red thing or visualizing red, and you're like, that's what it's like to see red. And look, there it is. So that concept, I claim, can't be had except by having the experience. You can't get it in another way. So on my view, I think, Mary's going to acquire this concept that she didn't have before and couldn't have got before, because you have to have the experience to acquire the concept. Once the concept is acquired, that together with her perfect physical knowledge allows her to make these deductions. The reason she couldn't do it inside the room, according to me, is because she didn't have the concept. Not because consciousness isn't physical. It's just that she doesn't have the like, how can she deduce something that she doesn't have the right concept for? Again, think about water and H2O. She doesn't have the concept of water. She's not going to be deducing anything about water being H2O. You need to first be, now you can get the concept of water without having to be exposed to water. You can define it as the clear, drinkable stuff that falls from the skies, etc., and know pretty much all there is to know about it as far as that goes. So consciousness is different like that. But that doesn't have anything to do with physicalism or non-physicalism. That had to do with something called concept empiricism. And concept empiricism is the claim that some concepts have to be acquired from experience. Probably the radicalist view is that all of them do, but the more restricted claim is just that some of them do. So I think that if any of them are candidates for being acquired from experience, it's these kind of phenomenal concepts. So that would be my way of thinking about the Mary case. Oh, so Sergey. All right. Thank you, Sergey, for saying that. I know I don't know how to pronounce these things, so that's very useful. So you were thinking in that way. If we use definition that there is just one mind, let's say mine, why can't I control a reality around me? Yeah. So because if it's produced all in the mind, then you should be able to control it. I don't know. So dreams are a good way to think about this. I would say, Sergey, hopefully I'm pronouncing Sergey right. In the dream, I often can't control what's going on. I've had brief lucid dreams. Um, and I usually wake myself up when I realize that I'm lucid dreaming, which is my problem. I'm like, yeah, I did it. And I'm like, damn, I woke up. But it's something you can practice, by the way. It's interesting. But I've actually talked to someone who said that they could lucid dream and couldn't control the things in their lucid dream. I had a discussion with this guy, Evan Thompson, the philosopher, who was speaking about this. Anyway, okay, so it's sometimes in lucid dreaming, people say they can control the things in their dream, but oftentimes in a dream you can't control the stuff that is going on, or you can control it only limitedly. So even things that you can normally control, like I often have this dream I'm running away from something, and I'm trying to run as fast as I can, but I'm slow. Or I think I know I can fly and I'm trying to jump into the air and fly, but I'm only jumping kind of really high and floating, but not like super flying off. And I'm like, why can't I just fly? And if you think about those kinds of things, I mean, I'm in a dream, right? So clearly, if there's ever a case where everything is made by my mind, it would be there. And yet I don't control everything. Now, why? Well, I don't know, because subconscious things are in control of it, and conscious mind, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I think that would be sort of the answer um, uh, to your question. It's because there's other things going on. Whether that means you have free will, well, I don't know. So suppose if solipsisms were false, you can't. I mean, this is something I often say about the free will debate, but I don't really know what counts because, like, for instance, I can't jump to the moon. And people laugh at me, but this is something that as a kid, I was mad that I was not able to do. I was like, well, this is sort of unfair. Like, I would really like to be able to jump to the moon. Yeah, I heard you could go up there. People flew there. So why can't I jump that high? It's just unfair of physical reality that it doesn't allow me to jump as high as I want to. So, that's childish thinking, obviously. But this is actual thoughts that I had as a kid. I was like, I want to jump to the moon. What's going on around here? Okay, so I'm not able to do that. No matter how hard I work, no matter how exercise, diet, training, positive thinking. Maybe I invented jetpack and all that stuff. I mean, just using my body, there's no way I'm going to be able to launch myself physically and jump high enough to go to the moon. So, okay, does that mean I'm not free in any important sense? Um, I mean, the young me felt that I was an infringement on my freedom, but everybody I've ever mentioned this to thinks that I'm being silly. When I mentioned this to people as a kid, they laughed at me. And even now, when I tell this story, people still laugh and say, what are you talking about? Of course, you can't jump to the moon. I say, I know, but why? You're infringing on my freedom. Well, most people don't feel like that is an infringement on their freedom. They feel like, they're perfectly free. It's just that reality doesn't allow you to do certain things because that's just how reality works. So now, if all of reality is made by your own mind, then does that mean that in some sense that there's something in your mind that's out of your control and that you don't freely control or something like that? Well, there I think you're going to start talking about what counts as you. So maybe those things are you, and maybe you are freely controlling them in some sense. So even in my dream scenario, when I was trying to fly and only jumping kind of high, maybe a part of my mind was in control of that, and I was trying to work out something, or I was freely doing it. So I don't know. I think these issues are complicated, but I see why you were asking that question now. It's interesting. Um, yeah. Let's see. Doesn't this entail that, let's gentrify again, concepts cut thinner than properties? Concepts cut thinner than, there's more concepts than properties, yes. As there's one property rejecting property dualism with other empirical identities like Martin's or Venus has multiple properties. I'm not sure I'm um, following this. So is this like the Jack Black objection, that there's got to be that that there's got to be two properties there because we identify the phenomenal aspect uh, by something by the what is likeness bit. That seems like maybe a property of the state. Um, but in this case, there's only one property. Uh, yeah, well, what I'm not sure which property, um, or how Venus has one property. So Venus has, well, the property of being seen in the morning, um, and the property of being seen in the evening. And in that respect, so does the brain state. It has the property of having an external observable profile and one that's presented to the inside, so to speak. Um, but I do feel the pull of a property dualist kind of push here, which is that if you really lean on this, there's two things bit, then it sounds like there's, well, two things. But there's only one thing. There's only one thing which can be viewed from different angles, so to speak. But that doesn't make the thing so viewed two things. It means that there are two views on it. So, um, and even there, you have to be careful because when you start talking about the views, it can sound like, well, that thing itself is it's phenomenal. It's kind of maybe a phenomenal awareness or something like that. Uh, yeah. I mean, this stuff is interesting, so I'm glad that you're pressing on this stuff. Let's see, my view on the afterlife. Is it studied in the field of philosophy? Well, I don't, yeah, I think mostly in philosophy of religion, maybe, but even in philosophy of technology and simulation theory, people would talk about something like this, maybe. But um, my own view is like, as far as things are considered now, I'm very skeptical that there is such a thing as afterlife. I don't think that there's any good reason to believe that there is a non-physical aspect of reality or that there is such a thing as a soul or anything that survives bodily death. And I haven't really been convinced by out of body experiences, near death experiences, um, astral projection. I mean, I've talked to various people who say things like this, and I'm willing to be convinced because I do like empirical reasoning. And if there were this kind of evidence, that would be like pretty good. It'd be conclusively interesting. But I just don't think it's very good. I don't think the case is shut. I don't dismiss it. I don't think we know. So I'm certainly open to there being something um, more than physical reality, but I don't really think that we have much reason to believe it. And my current considered view is that we have more reason to think that we live in a simulation than there is to think that there's an all knowing, all powerful, morally perfect God. So if there's anything like an afterlife, then it would have to involve simulating various worlds. So I do think that if consciousness is simulatable, if you can be uploaded into a computer, which I think the jury is out on, and I'm skeptical of, but my skepticism is being eroded by these empirical results that we keep finding. So I think that if that were the case, then if there's anything like an afterlife, it would be involved being uploaded into a digital reality. But other than that, I don't think we have any reason to expect that there is one naturally occurring. Um, Although various views about the mind have certain uh, implications of that. But I don't think it has anything to do. Like, for example, I don't believe that you have to be a dualist to think there's an afterlife. I think you could be. It's perfectly fine for there to be a physical afterlife. You could be a physicalist and still be an afterlife. Locke was the philosopher John Locke was very worried about this stuff. He wrote his whole stuff on personal identity was originated from his trying to make sense of how he could be a Christian and believe that there was only physical stuff. So Locke was pretty sensible in this way. He said, look, if God's all powerful, he could super add consciousness to physical material, just make it a physical property. And if that were true, then what would it mean for me to be to have an afterlife? Well, it'd be somehow bodily resurrection. And in fact, some religious texts talk about bodily resurrection, and they claim that the body is important, an important part of the resurrection. So, uh, could an all-powerful, all-knowing, morally perfect being make like after this physical body dies, could it be reproduced in some other plane of existence? Yeah, I don't see why a perfectly all-powerful, all-knowing being couldn't do something like that. Maybe that's what the multiverse is, guys. So who knows? I don't know that there's very much written per se about the afterlife as it occurs in religions, but I think people have written about this other stuff I've been talking about. So yeah, I think, did that answer that question? I'm not sure. let's see, what would a scientific breakthrough that could make hypotheses about the hard problem of consciousness testable? Um, who is this? Bamador, Pubg. Okay. Cool. Well, I don't know because the hard problem is supposed to be exactly the result of some properties that consciousness presents, which make it not testable. So the traditional hard problem, I mean, people talk about zombies and Mary, but you don't need that stuff to talk about the hard problem as Chalmers originally presented it. So the basic problem is this: science explains structure and function. Um, Explanations from the sciences talk about what something is made out of, its structure, and what it does, what its function is. Uh, but consciousness can't be explained by structure and function. That's the second premise of Chalmers' argument. I'm not saying that, it's Chalmers. The conclusion of that is that consciousness can't be explained by natural science. So the second premise is the one that does all the work, or a lot of people might think, and it simply says that consciousness is not explainable by structure and function. Um, that's on the basis of introspection. It just doesn't seem like consciousness has any relation to structure or function, according to these guys. So then, okay, so then you might just end it right there and say, so you can't explain it, big deal. Quietism, yay. But then the argument continues and says, well, if it were physical, then science could explain it. So therefore, not physical. So you have to go through all those steps um, to get to the conclusion that consciousness is not physical. But my point is that the second premise of this argument, that namely that consciousness doesn't have anything to do with structure or function, that being true rules out any way to test it, basically. And you can kind of see that with the zombie stuff. This is what people always harp on. So if the zombies are conceivable, then that means that you could have physical duplicates of me, like literally just like saying stuff like this, that don't have any consciousness and any phenomenal consciousness. And that's like, okay, so then no scientific thing could ever test that. And that's why people like Philip say, well, materialism and idealism and panpsychism are all empirically on a par, which I sort of tend to agree with on some days. Other days I wonder about this, but some days I tend to agree. So now, so I don't think anything's going to make it a testable hypothesis. If you instead mean by the hard problem, not this consciousness has nothing to do with function or structure, because if you're a physicalist, that has to be false. Maybe it can't be explained by structure and function, but if physicalism is true, it has to be some part of structure and function. So well, oh, right. What was I saying? Right. I lost. I was thinking about something else, guys. Sorry. Right. So if it is something physical, if it turns out that way, then it's got to be something that is in structure and function. Whether it can be explained by that, you might think that's not necessary, and then you get your type B physicalist and you get your type A physicalist dispute right there. But that's not going to make the hard problem itself testable, because it's set up in a way to sort of make it not testable. If on the other hand, what you mean is by making the hard problem testable, if what you mean is how could we ever provide like knockdown definitive evidence for any theory of consciousness, and answering the question, why is this particular physical configuration an experience of X as opposed to Y or nothing at all? Well, then that I think maybe you could make some progress on. But it's going to require a theory of consciousness becoming accepted. So, for example, if you like higher order theories of consciousness, like some people do, I don't know, there's no accounting for taste. Then, well, why is Why is this physical configuration in a state of seeing red as opposed to any other? Well, because it's representing itself as seeing red. So there's an answer to that. Um, Now, why is representing yourself as seeing red the nature of consciousness? Well, I don't know. There you would have a divergence. So um, my own tendency is to think, well, identity theories tend to don't require explanation. So, and on the other hand, if they do, then you can deduce it from the fact that maybe something like consciousness requires a kind of inner awareness. So, yeah. Um, I think that this is why people talk about dissolving the heart problem instead of solving it. It might have to be a change in the concept that we use. I think this is what if I were charitable and I wanted to interpret illusionism in a charitable way, people like Keith Frankish and Daniel Dennett, um, what I think that they are trying to do is to do what we in the business call conceptual engineering, where you try to take a concept and to take it and change the way that it's used and thought of and what its content is, so that they're trying to take the concept of consciousness and change it so that it's not something that's first personal in some essential way. And they're being resistance, obviously, because that's very difficult and strange to do. Okay, so I don't really think that there's going to be a breakthrough in this way that's gonna get rid of the hard problem. I think that, like with all other scientific problems, there's going to be just a lot of data, and that the resistance is going to kind of fade away. I mean, even with water and H2O, we tell the story about there being some definitive experiment where they split it into hydrogen and oxygen, but people resisted that experiment. People came up with all sorts of other interpretations of it. Before it was accepted, it was kind of just because, more interesting questions were arising from thinking that they were separate, which is in the moods that I tend to be in, where there just aren't explanations for identities. They're posited in order to make other kinds of explanations. They aren't, the identities themselves are posited in order to make other explanations. They aren't the result of some other explanation. So the water and H2O was something that was put forth as a theoretical posit to explain these other things. And it turns out you can explain a lot with it. Anyway, okay, so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but okay. This is fun, guys. So let's see. The two appearances back to Shantifier, morning star and evening star, in themselves are non-identical appearances. They just have a third entity causing the appearances. They're non-identical appearances. I'm not sure what to say. Let me think about that, because I see I'm getting distracted by your other question right underneath this. Okay, so what do I think of the letter on IIT? Well, I had a guy on a couple weeks ago. I talked to Felipe de Brigard. He was one of the signers. I know most of those people. I know a lot of them. And I was asked to sign that letter, but I said no. Really, what I said was I want to add some stuff to it before I sign it. It has to be changed. And they said, no, it's already written. You can just sign it. And I was like, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings, because I think that the word pseudoscience is an inflammatory word that's used as kind of an insult. It's like a fighting word. I would classify it as a fighting word. If the person is alive and you say that they are, their view is pseudoscientific, then they're going to want to fight you. Whether academically or physically depends on the person. So, to me, I think if you're going to use that word, then you have to have some very strong, not just reason to, but defense of the reasoning, that you have to actually lay out very carefully what the case is, and not just throw the word out with some half-assed case. And I thought that the letter was very half-assed in that way, so that they did not even say what pseudoscience was. They didn't say why very clearly they thought IIT was pseudoscience, and it was just a big mess in my opinion. So I'm glad I didn't sign it. But so the as I understand, the point that I would agree with from that letter, which wasn't made very clearly in the letter, but if you talk to any of them, I think that what they have in mind is the following thing. So we have a theory, and the theory is being claimed to be empirically supported. But when you look for the actual empirical support, this is not there. And it might be even worse than that. It might be that the things that they're claiming support the theory really are things that are auxiliary or ancillary to the main theory, and that many other theories would agree with. So just to take the most obvious example, if you claim that the visual cortex is importantly involved in visual consciousness, then many people are going to agree with you, because obviously the visual cortex is an important part of the story. It's visual cortex. So you're not unique in predicting that to be the area. So if you go around saying, my theory made a prediction and it's been confirmed, and you find out that that prediction was that the visual cortex should be like active when people are seeing things, then you would think to yourself, gee, that sounds like a dishonest, maybe almost dishonest, underhanded way of promoting the theory, saying that there's empirical support for it. And then the empirical support is this, like, it's not false. The theory does kind of say that maybe this would be true, but so do like all other theories, maybe not everyone, but most of them. So that was the position that people were saying was the case after this adversarial collaboration, which I'm involved in 2 adversarial collaborations not with the global workspace and IIT, but with higher order theories. One versus first order theories, that's run by David Chalmers and Ned Block, and one which is just amongst higher order theories, but it's all in the same group, run by different people, but funded by the same group. So anyway, the main beef, as I understood it, was that in this adversarial collaboration, the IIT people claimed that their theory made some prediction, which was very generic and was maybe partially verified or something like that, but wasn't really one of the core claims of IIT. Didn't test one of their axioms or one of their core IIT mathematical constructs or an implication of it. So in that sense, then, if you go around saying this proves my theory is on the right track and it doesn't, then I think you have some reason to start using the P word, the pseudoscience word. But that requires a lot of explanation and work, and doesn't have anything to do with panpsychism or any of this other stuff. It had to do with whether or not the theory is as its supporters say that it is, or whether they are promoting it in a way which oversells what the theory can do. And this is actually important because it sucks up money from funding, and also the popular imagination. So, when people read about IIT in the popular press and they say, oh, gee, this theory is a leading scientific theory and it's been confirmed, there's evidence for it. Well, they're getting the wrong picture according to the signers of the letter. They're getting the wrong picture. I've tried to get defenders of IIT to come and talk to me. So far, I did a long time ago. I had Masafumi Ozumi on a long time ago, and he's one of the writers of IIT 3, I think it was 3.0. But if anyone's out there wants to come on, I'm happy to discuss this stuff. So that's my view. I wish that they would write something that was more thoroughly argued and researched, because when I read the letter, I was like, whoa, dude, you guys are going to publish this is fighting words and you don't really have a strong case here. They disagree. They're all adults. They can make their own decisions. So I didn't think it was wise to sign it as written. Now, of course, in their defense, what they said was, this is just a letter to the editor. It's not supposed to make the whole case. We only have 500 words, so we're really constrained. Which I understand is all true, and therefore maybe an argument that you shouldn't have made the case in a letter. I also wasn't really at this ASS thing and didn't know too much about this IIT versus global workspace theory thing, so I really didn't really feel like I had a good grip on it, but we did write a previous letter to the NIH, the National Institute of Health or whatever, saying, be careful with IIT because it's not clear that it can be empirically tested. And that's not bad. If a theory can't be empirically tested, then great. But if you're saying not only that it can be, but that it has been, well, then I think we are owed a more careful accounting. So that's sort of what I think about the letter thing. Interesting times. Let's see, what do I think of inferring the ontological gap from the epistemic gap via the explanatory gap? That if the physical doesn't explain the mental is not. Yeah, I think that's where, that's sort of what I don't know when that was, when you wrote that, but uh, wait, I'm sorry, I got distracted reading a few things that are coming in. Yeah, so I'm very skeptical of that move. I feel the pull of it, obviously. Like I was saying at the beginning of this stream, I think, which I didn't realize I've been rambling on for so long. But I'm glad you guys are asking these questions, and I do enjoy having these conversations. So, I'm getting text. I'm very skeptical of these gap jumping inferences, and I feel the pull of them. As I said, I was probably in my youth some kind of dualist. When I read Descartes, I thought it was just completely obvious that that the argument was successful. That conceiving of the mind without the body was just like, yeah, I thought it was like the clearest case I'd ever read of just like open and shut, just had to be true. So I do feel the pull of those kind of intuitions, but I also just wonder why it is that we take ourselves so seriously. In the sense that I wonder why we think that those things mean anything. Like why should it be intelligible to us the way things are? I just don't understand why people so adamantly cling to this. So it's, it had to do with the principle of sufficient reason. There's a whole big empiricism versus rationalism in the background debate, obviously, here, but I find that whole camp to be so, of which I'm sort of half in, by the way. But I just find it to be, that's bizarre that we would be able to tell simply because of thinking about it, something fundamental about reality like this, that consciousness is physical or not, or it just seems to me so wildly counterintuitive and at odds with everything we've discovered that I don't know, hubris doesn't seem strong enough a word to me, to be honest. The people just think it's good, like it's got to be this way. Like there's just a gap. How could it be this way? How could it be physical if we can't understand it? I just think, I don't know, maybe it just is that way. And we can't understand it. So, what would be so bad about not understanding why it is that way? And people really take this seriously. I mean, when I was on Twitter before I quit it, people were yelling at me all over the place, saying that this was like the stupidest idea they'd ever heard. And that was a cop out, a giving up. And I just can't. I mean, I can because on certain days I feel very strongly that yes, I am as a rational agent. It just has to be like that. Like how else? Like I see connection that's there. It's not there. A to B to inference to how to. Like I get all that stuff. But haven't we learned over and over that we just been wrong? Like just parallel postulate. Well, yeah, no, 1,000 years. How long, guys? Did you work on that and until you ended up discovering a whole new branch of geometry rather than proving the thing that you thought you were going to prove. So it's not like I'm against a priori arguments. It's just that if you want to start talking a priori arguments, I'll start talking about the Shambi argument. So if you really think zombies are that fascinating, then talk about Shambis, physicalism. So there is a creature, physical, has consciousness. So dualism is false, therefore QED rationalism rules. So I don't know. I don't take those gap arguments very seriously. I think that to me, this is why I wrote this paper that I have called Deprioritizing the A Priori Argument. So I wasn't so much, so deprioritizing comes from the police literature where they didn't legalize marijuana. At first, they decriminalized it or deprioritized it. Where to deprioritize is to say, yeah, it's still illegal, but we're just not going to like go putting effort into chasing people down. So, okay. So I think the a priori arguments are interesting. And if you knew everything, then yeah, you can make all sorts of a priori inferences. Fantastic. But, you know, so what? How does that help us now? So the deprioritizing view that I have is that, yes, when everything is in, we'll be able to a priori know which is which. But by then it will be too late because we'll have done all the empirical work. So, um, that the real moving forward of the debate is going to be empirical. And the analogy that I think works is with water and H2O. So um, we discovered empirically that water was H2O, but now we know a priori that water is H2O. We can deduce it a priori because we acquired the concept empirically. But now, if you sort of just think about the conditional, if the world is like this and this and this, then water is H2O, and the antecedent of that has the description of this world we live in, then it's a priori knowable that if the world is this way, then water is H2O. What's empirically learnable is that the world is this way, but that just has to do with acquiring the concept. So I do think that the explanatory gaps will go away, or they could go away. I'm also open to them not going away, but I think it's possible that they will go away in the fullness of time. But that we shouldn't worry about it too much now because what we need is a lot more empirical data to, refine our concepts and get all this other stuff right. Um, so that's what I would say about that. So to me, they more reveal your own personal, like someone that says, zombies really show that physicalism is false, or alternatively, zombies show that dualism is false. People who say these things, they're saying something about themselves. They're saying, I find it very intuitive that this is the case. It seems to me that zombies are possible. Therefore, it seems to me that physicalism is false. And then they're saying all true things. So as long as you say, it seems to me in front of everything, then the argument works. It does give you the reason why it seems to you that physicalism is false. Doesn't work for me. Cool. All right. So I am going to have to probably be going at some point when the time is right. Oh my gosh, I'm typing something and thinking different things, and it's okay. So I do have a bit more time though, and let's see who else is asking questions. Did you have any conclusive thoughts on how your extensive discussion with T-Jump went on the whole rule following paradox and normative logic? What is the best response to the paradox? Oh, T-Jump. Yeah. Conclusive thoughts. You mean thoughts in conclusion? um, yeah, so I guess I hadn't really thought too much about it. I think that T-Jump is interesting, has some interesting thoughts, but also kind of a one-trick pony in a certain manner of speaking. And the trick has limited interest, so there's that. But I don't really think that he fully understands the rule following argument, and I got a lot of flack for that as well. I put that video on my channel as well. I wasn't trying to hide it, but people are accusing me of being a moron and a waste of time, and people give PhDs out to idiots. Look at this guy. Okay, so to me, the rule following argument is one of the it's a very important argument from Kripke. I think that although T-Jump doesn't know it, he has the solution that he has in mind is the normal solution that everyone else adopts, which is that it's the, I mean, it's the one that Kripke argued for in the book that he wrote on this, which is that it's the community. So no one denies that we make these sorts of inferences. The question is whether we're justified in doing it and what justifies it. So clearly we take ourselves to be following rules. The question is whether it's the rule that justifies what we're doing. And Kripke's argument tries to show that it's not the rule that justifies what we're doing. It's the community. It's that people have done it this way that justifies what we're doing. So when I think that 7 + 5 is 12 or whatever the case may be, the reason why I'm not doing quus and I'm doing plus or whatever the case is on this view is simply because I live amongst a group of people that do addition, they do plus. And that's what I was taught. I was taught addition, and because the people here do addition. So there's a community of people that do a certain thing, and I was brought up in that community, and so I do that thing. But it's not the formal rules that guide my behavior. And I don't really think there is, as far as I can tell, any good answer to this paradox that doesn't kind of admit the point that Kripke wanted to make, which is that the rule doesn't really justify what you're doing, and it's not really guiding our behavior. So the best response to the paradox is probably to learn the lesson from what I was talking about before, which is to recognize that everywhere we go, when we try to figure this stuff out, we meet these sorts of problems. And so, that's just how it works. Now, could I have thought of a better way to explain it to T-Jump? I think so. I think I was getting very annoyed and irritated by the end of that discussion, even though we had agreed beforehand that we would be adversarial, and he was like, come at me. He only wants clicks, by the way. That's what he cares about. He wants people to view his channel so he can get money. And so he doesn't care if it's a flame war or a dumpster fire. That gets him more views, actually. So, he's happy to play along. But I feel like I was getting actually truly irritated by the end of that discussion. And I realized afterwards I hadn't eaten anything. I was kind of annoyed that he seemed very stubbornly obstinate in his refusal to understand, even if you think you haven't. Yeah, anyway, so that's my considered view, is that I don't think there's a good answer. I kind of am, I don't really think we have a lot of solutions. I think we have a lot of problems, a lot of puzzles. Okay, let's see. One thing I thought about consciousness the other day. Has there been reports of people becoming Chalmers zombie after brain damage? Like, I sometimes lose consciousness and no one notices. I don't think so. I mean, there's people that lose time. But true Chalmers zombies, to really be a Chalmers zombie, you have to not notice that you are a zombie. You can't, because if you did, then you would be functionally distinct. So it has to be something that you can't tell is happening to you if it did happen to you. This is part of his argument for why he thinks you can be uploaded to the computer, to a digital environment. That has to do with his dancing and fading qualia. So if you imagine your neurons being replaced with computer silicon chips one by one, and you get to the crucial one that makes it go to none, it's either some particular neuron, or you gradually ramp down till you get to that one, and you put a switch there and you just flick that switch so that it's on and off, and you imagine your experience is blinking in and out of existence, right in front of your face, like the color red. Like right now I have an email in my account, there's a red number, 500 billion over there, so it's right there. Now imagine that's blinking in, blink, there's not. Okay, so if that's happening to me right now, that would be very bizarre. If there's one thing we feel confident about, is that our conscious experience, when it's happening to us, is we sort of know what's going on. So if you thought you didn't have consciousness when you replaced this silicon chip in my head, then you would be committed on Chalmers's view to saying that you don't know that this isn't happening to you. You could be having it happen right now. It would be all the same. So there's that. And in fact, Chalmers thinks, this is going to be, practically speaking, why a lot of people get converted to his view about digital consciousness. For example, if your grandmother goes to the hospital, or take my son, he's 8 now. By the time he's 25, I'll probably be deaf. I've been playing music my whole life. My ears are shot. So, in 20 years, I probably won't be able to hear, if I'm alive, won't be able to hear anything. So what if I go to the surgery department, the hospital, and they implant into my head an artificial, not a hearing device, but a new set of neurons that can process this information. And then I hear my son's voice and I start crying, go, I haven't heard your voice in 20 years. And then what's he going to say? Well, he's going to say, you're not hearing anything, Dad. That's a robot in your head. Or is he going to say, oh, wow, you can hear things just fine with this digital implant. So Chalmers thinks that's going to change people's minds when grandmas and so forth start coming home with these digital implants. My own view is that I don't know whether that's any different than wearing glasses. So how do you know that the phenomenal experience isn't generated by some part of the biological brain that's left? So anyway, as far as the Chalmers zombies kind of cases go, yeah, it would be really hard to notice if they really had their consciousness disappear in this way. And Chalmers thinks that it's actually like a law of physics or something that this won't happen. Now, in a less mundane sense, could you ever have like a period of time where you just had your consciousness disappear during the course of a day? There was a guy who wrote a paper on this called Michael Palin, and he called them part-time zombies, and he tried to argue for something on the basis of these part-time zombies that became zombies between noon and 2 o'clock on Tuesdays or something. Yeah, so I don't really, as far as we know, what we have are things where, like I said, people lose time, and they still go around doing things. People black out. They don't remember things. Other people say that they did, but nothing like this, that, as far as I know, although I could be wrong and I don't know a lot of this stuff. Okay, so let's see. Do you think explanatory gaps are everywhere in nature, or is physical phenomenal gap universal? I'm tempted towards saying it'd be a unique case of Moraine connection, Brook grounding. Yeah, so people like Ned Block do think that these gaps are everywhere. So Ned doesn't even think you can deduce that water is H2O. So for people like him, he thinks you can't even rule out that there's ghost water, some kind of non-physical water correlated with H2O. So he takes a very strong view, and sometimes, rarely during the course of a month, if it's a blood moon during Zelda, then I am tempted to accept that view. But generally speaking, I don't. I tend to be more attracted to the view that consciousness will be unique in this way, but not even really super unique, because I do think that the gap will go away once we know enough. So I don't think that if we ever reach the end of inquiry and knew everything that we could physically know, like all the stuff about physical reality, then I think there would be no gaps. I think we would know that consciousness was physical or not, because we'd be able to deduce or not that. Now, you could still, I think, hold out maybe, but I would be very skeptical at that point. I don't know. So yeah, I'm sort of inclined to think towards the view that there are no gaps. But then again, I start to think maybe that's that hubris thing again. Like, why would be so wrong if even at the end of inquiry, like, there were no gaps, or even if there were no end of inquiry, such that science just always had new questions to answer. So to me, yeah, that's why I split my views on this. I just don't know what to think. I find myself profoundly puzzled by this stuff, and I'm more interested in mapping out the spaces and seeing what you can and can't say, and then I am in sort of being right. I just don't know. I think it's very hard. And the more I think about it, the more I get confused. So, um, I watch a lot of these online debates, and what I see is a lot of people overly confident about what they know. And I'm always, I mean, I guess I used to feel that way, but I don't know how you can maintain that. I really don't know how you can, how that sense of confidence about I know what's like, or even strongly believe what's true, how that survives like coming into contact with science and philosophy. Once you know how many views there are, how much debate there is, how many people have disagreed, how many things there are to disagree about, it just becomes disorientating to me. So, um, like I said, my strongest commitment is to the claim that physicalism hasn't been refuted. That's usually enough to get me into an argument or six. So, pretty good. Yeah, and then about the arbitrariness of the connection or whether or not it's simply non-derivable or brute force or grounding or something like that. I'm very open to that sort of view, as I was saying before. Yeah, interesting. All right, these are all very good questions. Um, I should spend more time on YouTube because I always have fun when I show up here and have these discussions. Okay, so I'll probably be ending this live stream. I really only came to talk about the upcoming Consciousness Live and to make sure I could handle the chat, which now I think that I can. So thanks, guys, for coming by and having this discussion with me. I appreciated all the questions. And I don't really do a great job of keeping up with the comments, but I usually read all the comments, even the ones that I don't respond to. So if you have a question or you want to say something, then feel free to go ahead. I'll try to keep up with them. I've been having more time to do that. I've been lurking in the comments lately because of, well, I'm not teaching until March, so I've just been, having more times to spend on the internet. But anyway, so feel free to drop me a line, send me an email. Tell me what you would like to see on Consciousness Live, or maybe more live streams or more videos generally. And until then, take it easy. I'll figure out how to end live streams less awkwardly later, guys. Okay.